I'm Carla Wright from the Corrales Arts Center board, and I am so very happy to be introducing to you the playwright, Robert Benjamin, who tells me that all his life he's been driven by hard challenges. For example, after 30 years of being an experimental physicist at the Los Alamos labs, he converted to playwriting, which is, he said, is a calling that he really had always had. And he credits, in part, his 11th grade English teacher in Silver Spring, Maryland, as well as New Mexico's openly creative atmosphere for planting and nurturing and harvesting this calling. I'd say he's done extraordinarily well. 5 full-length plays, 20 short plays, performances in 10 states, and the viewing audience of the last Hunker Down virtual performance over 200. Robert Benjamin's recent plays explore the theme aging with grace, courage, and humor, and fits so beautifully into one of the objectives of the Corrales Arts Center, which is to interrelate art and wellness. Robert, my first question to you. COVID-19 is the contextual framework for Hunker Down. How did you address the social fallout?
Well, the unfortunate COVID experience that we're all having right now seemed ripe for theater because there's so much stress and anxiety that we're all facing. So the play that I wrote during the first month or two of the COVID experience deals with a senior woman. Her name is Barry, and she is having a lot of anxiety right now because of cabin fever. She has a very strong need to want to socialize in person with another human being. And the only candidate nearby where she lives is this guy across the street whom she really doesn't like very much. But all the other neighbors can't satisfy her need because they've been out shopping or out have kids that come and go. So the point of the play is for her to try to entice her neighbor across the street to visit with her in person. So that's what the play is about, and it deals with the social element of how we deal with cabin fever.
Yes, Barry wants to visit Kevin in person, but also be careful with COVID safe practices. He's a recluse. Will he allow her to visit in person?
Yes, that's the underlying question in the play. As a recluse, he's been enjoying himself, being alone all this time, and he's just happy as a clam. But she really needs the help, and so we have to see whether she can figure out how to get him interested in meeting with her.
All right, next question then. What might Barry offer Kevin that would open the opportunity for an in-person visit?
Well, that's her big challenge, and she just tries to talk him into it initially, but that doesn't work because when you're trying to talk a recluse into socializing, that's a real challenge. So that didn't go too well, and she has to rely on other ideas and resources to try to entice him. And
we have something to really look forward to and seeing how she does that.
yeah, the audiences that have seen this play have not been in consensus about what it finally is about her that seems to turn the trick. So for people who come see the play, they may have opportunity to sort of make their own judgment about what's working for her.
Robert, The original Hunker Down had a slightly different script that you adapted to a different context as COVID isolation continued. Can you talk about how you changed the script to be consistent with social needs the longer the isolation is taking place?
Yeah. Well, I wrote the play as a stage play because that's what I do as a playwright. I imagine the stage and how the actors move about on the stage. So after I had gone through a couple of drafts of the play in April and May timeframe during the beginning of the COVID shutdown, um, I realized pretty quickly that if this play was going to be produced, it would not be on a live stage for a very long time, perhaps not even in my lifetime. So I decided that was not a good strategy. But then I saw that people were putting up Zoom plays, that is, putting up plays on video conference technology. And although the first one I saw, not mine, but someone else's play, I thought was pretty awful, I did learn that one could do this much better than the first one that I saw. So I decided to try and adapt the Hunker Down stage play into a Zoom play. And what that entailed was taking the stage play in which she tries to visit him on his front porch, and he will not agree to visit. He won't open the door to let her in, and he will not come out to visit because he is hunkered down. So the play in its entirety for the stage play was on his front porch. And I decided that instead of that, he declines to visit with her when she comes over, but he does tell her if she goes back across the street into her own home, he would be willing to meet with her in a Zoom call. So he calls her up and they have the conversation on a Zoom call that in the stage play they had on his front porch. And
So they
so it
both seem to
truly is a Zoom play.
they both seem to be juggling repartee or rationale, juggling it back and forth, using their wits as to who is going to provide an explanation that's satisfactory to the other. Um, was the original play any different in script? Was there a different emphasis that has moved along to this one that we're going to see?
Well, the emphasis has always been about trying to socialize. That is her effort to get him engaged in an in-person social interaction. So that part has stayed the same. What has changed as the script has evolved in response to audiences that have seen it is how it is that they figure out how they might come together. Um, and and that is still changing. I can't guarantee exactly how it's going to work for the show we're going to be seeing at Corrales, but it has been changing, and audiences seem to think it's changing for the better. So I'm going to keep heading in that direction.
Do you plan to write a sequel to this Hunker Down that takes us even further along the months of social distancing and social isolation?
I am actively working on that. Again, in response to audience comments at the last performance, quite a few people said they'd like to see what's happening. So I am actively working on it. Whether it will be ready for the September performance at Corrales, I don't know yet because I haven't heard actors read it aloud to know whether it actually works. But I do have an idea of how these characters can evolve their relationship. Um, and I will have to see how that matures.
We'll look forward to that. Robert, the two characters, Barry and Kevin, how much license do they have in choosing their own costumes and setting?
Well, the actors who perform these two characters, they have a lot of license and influence over how they do it. I encourage them to choose setting that reflects the character. So in the case of Kevin, he's a recluse. In one of the previous productions of the play, the actor that was playing him chose to do it in his, I guess you'd call it a study. It's more like what people call a man cave, where it's got books all over everything, and it's got skis and a bicycle, or maybe several bicycles. So you get the idea that this guy really enjoys his home, and he has a lot of things that he is doing and takes care of. And the woman, by contrast, is in a very neat, well-ordered environment. Her room, everything is in place where it should be. So that's an example of how the sort of backdrop would work. And in costuming, it would be a similar thing. The woman is dressed very nicely and fashionably, in contrast to the guy who's basically a slob.
Ah, and Archie Bunker.
Yeah, well, not quite that bad, but yes.
Nobody can be an Archie Bunker. At the end of each Zoom performance, it's very important to you to have audience or viewer talkback discussion on Zoom. Can you give your rationale for that?
Yeah, that's a very important question to me, because I view the work I do as a playwright as being an effort to start important conversations, particularly among seniors, but also intergenerational and other ages. And I view this kind of theater as being opportunity to be e- evocative of issues that we deal with, but we may have trouble talking about on a regular basis. So the plays provide opportunity for the audience to talk about the characters when they're really talking about themselves and their own philosophy. So for me, the conversation among audience is really an important part. And I like to be sort of a fly on the wall listening to that conversation. So the only way that's going to happen is if they have it right after the play when I'm there to listen to it. I can't go home with all these people and listen. So it's, for me, the aim of the talkback is to hear the audience talking among themselves. They often have their own questions and issues to bring up, but I have a few that I'm happy to insert if things are going a bit slowly. And I find that's really important. I like to know which things audiences agree about on what they're seeing, and which things they are split and have different opinions. As I mentioned, for example, some people think that certain things that Barry did worked as far as enticing Kevin to visit, while others believe that there were other things that Barry offered that were more important.
Hmm. So the viewer responses are really just as dramatic and provocative as Barry and Kevin's. So it's really it's a play that has universal application to all its viewers, because we're all doing this together. And I would think that there would be a lot of audience audience members volunteering to talk about their own situations and their own rationale. This last performance that had over 200 viewers, did you get a lot of discussion afterward?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a very lively conversation. In fact, I think the conversation lasted longer than the play. No, yeah, they had
Nice.
a lot to say about it, and they spoke about the characters. They weren't talking in the first person about their own experience, but you could tell from the way they were perceiving the characters that they pretty much had their own experiences in mind, and their own framework in mind, certainly their own point of view. And it's very exciting for the audience and for me both to see how different people interpret the same play in such different ways.
Do any of the viewers ever want to talk to one another rather than simply to the screen as a monologue? Is there ever a dialogue that gets going?
Oh yeah, several times they've argued with each other about it. You know, someone has said something and someone else in the audience says, "No, no, I don't buy that." You know, that's just not the way it was, and so they counter with what they think it is. So yeah, we've had some pretty lively discussions about this during the talkback, and I encourage that.
Who will be leading the talk back? Will it be you or one of the two actors?
We really haven't decided for sure. Probably be me, but it might be one of the actors who is also a skilled moderator. We'll have to see as it gets closer. But as I mentioned, if it is me, I just try to be quiet and kind of guide the conversation, but not really get involved in it because I'm more interested in hearing the audience talk about the play.